obviously, I'm very good. As if you couldn't hear me. Obviously, I've been very grateful for the turnout and all the affection and all the cards and stuff that I've been receiving since I announced my retirement. And you guys investing your time standing on a line for some old bald guy who's just there to sign your books. It's very flattering. I mean, I do appreciate it. And obviously, it's been a good career, and didn't realize until after I announced that I was retiring how unusual it was for somebody of my age and my reputation to announce a retirement. And I feel like a slacker. Because about a month after I announced my retirement, Joe Sinnott announced his retirement. Joe Sinnott is 92 years old. I mean, now I really feel like a slacker. The only reason he stopped working is that they canceled the Spider-Man comic strip. That was what he was working on. Well, they canceled it. Well, no, I got no more work to do, so I'm retiring. And I'm turning 65 tomorrow. I feel like, gosh, It's a wonderful place to celebrate my Medicare birthday. And my wife and I have enjoyed visiting here with Niagara by the Lake yesterday. We plan on coming back for this year we're celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary this month. Wow. So next month we're planning on coming back to Niagara Falls for our 39th wedding anniversary. And looking at all the books that at the sign, one thing great about comic conventions, you get haunted by the ghosts of comics past. And seeing all the work I've done from my very first, people have come in with the Astonishing Tales number 25, which had my very first printed professional work in it, to the more current stuff. I had some issues of Sirens that I got to sign as well. So I said, I covered the entire gamut. And realized, I've had the opportunity to do exactly what I wanted to do since I was 5 years old. Wow. So for 60 years, I got to play in the best sandbox ever, had the time of my life. And despite the physical limitations that in part causing me to retire, what a great life I've had. What a great opportunity I've had. I've been working in comics for 45 years. And had a great time. The fact that, for whatever reason, in an industry that obviously always skews young, that here I am, going on 65 years old, and I was still turning down work when I retired. That Marvel and DC were still kind enough to keep asking me if I would do this project, that project. And now with the preface, I know this is incredibly bad timing. I know you said you'd retire, but you said you might do something if it really interests you. And I said, and sometimes it would interest me, and other times I said, I earn more retired. And now I can pick and choose what I want to do. And it's a great feeling, the fact that, they say in this industry it is a rarity, for a man my stature to retire before he's aged out. The fact that for whatever reason, my work is still as popular today as it had been through most of my career. I'm very grateful. And the thing I used to always say about, like when some artists say that there'd be the fans are leaving them, or young fans aren't finding their work and wanting to purchase it. I said part of that also I think depends on the artist, because one of the things I think is if an artist becomes complacent and doesn't enjoy the work anymore, then how do you expect that to, how do you expect the fans then to appreciate your work? The fans have a good instinct on certain things. They can tell if you're putting in your best or you're having the time of your life. In my case, I put all that extra detail because that's what I love to do. So they figure he either has to love his work or be the craziest person on this planet, or both. And the thing is, I like to think that a reason that I stayed popular as long as I did was the fact that I genuinely, absolutely, positively love drawing comics. I've been offered work in advertising, I've worked in animation. No, I'm a comic book artist. The late Ross Andrew paid me a compliment many years back when when he saw my work, he said, "You're a natural at this." And I said, "Yeah, I can't imagine what my life would have been without comics. I'm grateful that I don't have to worry about that, that I never had to worry about that, that for whatever reason, I was employable." Marv Wolfman one time told me that, because he was my first editor. Boy, was he a strict editor. And since I never had an art lesson, so I was learning just by what I was seeing in the comics himself. And Marv used to be an art teacher. He was sometimes a little brutal in his critique, and always wanted. In later years, of course, Marv and I developed a partnership and a friendship as to why they kept hiring me despite all those flaws. And he said, "Drawing, we figured you'd learn. Storytelling, you had from the beginning. That's something we couldn't teach you, and that's what made comics different from other art forms. The fact that I knew instinctively how to visually tell a story. And that kept me working. And of course, I was the only dedicated person willing to do team books at a time that no one wanted to do team books. Because at that point, there were no royalties. You got paid the same page rate for drawing a story with one character as you would for drawing a book with a dozen characters. And I wanted to draw the books with a dozen characters to start. Then get more. And so I became valuable to them because I was doing the books that no one else wanted to do. I got the Avengers because the artist who was working on the Avengers took a vacation. I did a fill-in issue. I said, "Oh, he wants to do it? Fine. Let him have it. I don't want it back." So I ended up getting the Avengers. Got the Inhumans because the artist was going to do it for whatever reason. He left, so I got the Inhumans at the last minute. And Fantastic Four because the artist who was working on it became late. And they figured that I had worked with him, Rich Buckler, because I worked as his assistant for a while. So I figured, well, maybe George knows how to draw Fantastic Four. I have to really learn, really. But again, in my youth, before I really sat down and tried to really learn how to draw, I was drawing 3.5 books a month, all team books. I mean, I look at them now and say, oh gosh, I was faking it a lot because you had to in order just to produce. But I was having such a great time. I remember doing the Inhumans book. I finished it in less than a week. So I became valuable. But then when I realized if I wanted a longer career, I had to sit down and really learn how to draw. I can't just fake it and expect to have a career that will last. So that, of course, that's when I started getting slower. But because I was dedicating more time to my work. Jack Kirby was another artist. I mean, he was doing so much work. But then when he got down just doing Thor and Fantastic Four, Jack then could really knuckle down and say, no, I'm going to do my best work on 2 books rather than doing less of my best work on 5 books. And even though he could have done 5 books. So he inspired me in that regard. But, again, it's like when people say I had a prolific career, there are a lot of artists who drew a lot more than I did. It's just that I happen to do books, thankfully, that have had an impact. I mean, when people ask me what my favorite title was, really, I did the Titans, I've done the Avengers, I did the Fantastic Four, I did Wonder Woman, I did Crisis on Infinite Earths, History of the DC Universe, Infinity Gauntlet, Hulk, Future Imperfect. All these books that had a long afterlife. So I can't choose them among my children. I mean, I've been very lucky to be able to do all these great books. And the fact that when I realized that retirement was the only way I can go, I was going to work on one more project with Marv Wolfman. Because for Marv, yes, I would do anything to work with him again. But until I realized I was working on one page, and in a week I couldn't get that page finished because I couldn't see it clearly. I couldn't be happy with the results of it. And that's when I realized, okay, it's time to retire because I didn't want Marv to write a script that he's going to have to wait, 3 years for the first issue to come out. And that's when I realized, okay, it's time to hang it up before I start doing less than my best work and have to live under the shadow of my own work. I didn't, people are aware of my issues with my vision and everything else, and I just didn't want people feeling sorry for me or feeling like, he can't do his best work. And some might be a little rude and say, then why is he still working? And I realized, okay, it's time to back away. And 65, people retire at 65. Not in this day and age as much, but it is good. And when people come in and give me all their books to sign, and I look at that stuff and say, oh God, I used to kick butt, didn't I? But at least I can look back at a career that I'm very, very proud of. And thanks to you all, I'm realizing that I was more than just a person working in comics. I made a dent in the industry, which I never really realized as much. People tell me that, but you don't really know that because, again, for me, I'm working. And there they are. All righty. I was holding court. There we go.
I brought the girls.
Ah.
Hey, we came. How's it going?
Oh, hello, darling.
Long time no see.
I know. Hello again.
Nobody told me it was Hawaiian shirt day.
Oh, for me, it's always Hawaiian.
I tried to bring
Wherever
Wherever you are.
No idea.
He's at the hotel room to veg out.
I tried to bring him.
Right. So
Nothing.
Oh, well,
ask me any of Jim's questions, I'll lie.
that's right. He's Mini Jim.
He's my Maxi B.
Yes, there you go. Well, in case you don't know, Joseph Rubenstein.
Hello.
One of those guys, he makes a lot of people look good.
Right. Well, but that's because I'm ugly.
Oh, there you go.
I want to point out that when children are
There
born,
it is.
they either look like.
Oh, you guys are all wearing red. It's great.
Oh, there he is.
It's a moment here first. Right.
I know.
So I just
Oh
want
my
to.
God, red shirts.
Right.
Oh, I love it.
The chemically imbalanced one is here now, we can begin.
Right. So you notice when
Oh, that-
children are born, they either look like
The-
Gandhi or Churchill, and when they get older, they look like us.
Yeah. Oh, the one final connection.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're all. Okay, is this being monitored?
I'm the moderator, but you.
Oh, no, I've been just,
George would like to be disciplined, actually.
that's, oh, yeah.
Okay.
Fetish comment.
If you need the discipline,
Right, no, please.
I'm Jeff from Sketchbook Comics.
Hi,
Clearly,
Jeff.
we know
Hi,
who
Jeff.
all of them are. Had the pleasure of having dinner with these gentlemen last night. Fantastic time.
I spilled a drink on him.
I spilled a drink on me too. It's
And he hasn't washed his shirt since.
He chews with his mouth open.
a little bit. Yeah. We'll basically run into Q&A. So anybody who has questions, throw your
I
hand up.
have one, for real. Okay.
You can start it
So,
out then.
in the world, very few people are asked for their autograph, told how wonderful they are, how much they meant to your childhood. Most people in the world don't have something at the end of the day to point to and say, look what I did, right? So we are all being privileged this way, and I wonder, what is one of the most touching things a fan ever said to you about your work in their life?
Most recently, actually, it was just, it happened, actually at the tribute
Did you
yesterday.
hear, George?
At the tribute yesterday, where a gentleman came in and said that I saved his daughter's life. That she was a depression, and for whatever reason, he showed her the Wonder Woman comics I was doing, and that seemed to give her the strength and drive to go on. And I've had this type of story several times in my career, when you realize that what you're doing for entertainment, in some cases, can really inspire. It can sometimes give strength, particularly for those who are, whose lives are out of the norm, the outsiders, and that you have an impact. And the late Michael Turner had said something that I found incredibly pithy. Michael Turner, for those who don't know, he was a magnificent artist, but he died way too young because of cancer, and was never bitter. And I was doing a panel with him, and I made a comment to some fans saying, we're comic book artists, we're not rocket scientists. And Michael, without missing a beat, said, yes, but think of the people we inspired to be rocket scientists. That man made me look like a curmudgeon. He was an incredibly positive spirit. And again, because comics instilled that in him too. So that, comics, I think, kept Mike alive longer. That's my story.
I had some guy also this convention come up and said that reading The Death of Captain Marvel had helped him get through his own spout of cancer. which I thought was kind of strange because I didn't want to point it out to him, but the guy in the book dies. But at the same time, we got to keep the perspective here. Yeah, maybe I helped out this guy get through a bad spot, but you know, we haven't cured cancer or anything like that. You know, we're pop culture heroes. We're not actual changing the world heroes or anything like that. So I just thought I'd bring everybody down on that note.
How about you, Joe?
Jim has built a career on that.
Give me 5 minutes on Joe and he'll be destroyed.
He knew me when and now. Two things come to mind, actually. A guy told me that he's a children's book illustrator now, and he told me that like his hand had been crushed, and he rehabilitated it by imitating my inking, by copying things I did, which was very touching. But the other thing was, a guy came up to me, a white-haired guy, and he said, you know, this comic book showed up in my mailbox when I was 10 years old, and I'm 51 now, and I was 60 at the time, so I was only 9 years older than the guy. And he said, I've always wanted to have this signed because it's on my bucket list. I went, you got a bucket list? He says, yeah, I have a brain tumor, and the doctor said I should get my bucket list done sooner than later. And then he showed me a scan, and he's at like half a brain or something. I was like, geez. And it's like, it was profoundly touching and saddening that this guy needed to get this comic book signed by me before the end of his life.
And I thought I brought you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah. I'm trying to outdo you for once.
Wow.
No, but I preface this by saying, who gets this in life? Who gets people to say, look how important you were to my formative years, or my later years, or my cancer years? You know, it's like we do this stuff because it's fun, because we want to do it, because we don't want to work at Walmart, you know, and they paid us, and all of a sudden we're like celebrities.
Yeah, I mean, all I ever wanted to do was draw the comics that I grew up with, and to have had any kind of impact beyond that. I mean, that's an extra perk in life. Again, people are asking me for my autograph, as they ask for all of us. Yes, I mean, to them, our autographs, something we do, we sign so many things in our lifetime. It has worth to them. It means something to them. So that I find totally astounding. I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around it. When my wife said, you know, to accept the fact you're a celebrity. Really, you know, I put my pants on 3 legs at a time the way I've always done.
I toss mine up in the air and jump into it.
But I have people for that.
I love it. Okay.
Back there in the blue.
I don't know if anybody's asked this yet, but Mr. Starlin, what was your idea behind Thanos to begin with?
It was a psychology class I took in junior college after I got out of service. We had a guest lecturer come in and talk about the Freudian concepts of Thanos and Eros. I gravitated immediately toward Thanos. And the rest of it is just putting it and cobbling it together as we went along. It's all from Freud, thank you. That's what my mother told me.
Does Thanos have penis ending?
And all sorts of different kinds of endings.
First, I want to say thank you guys for coming here. It's a great pleasure to see you guys here. Two-part question. First, Mr. Perez, have you seen any of the live-action shows like next season? The CW is going to be doing like Crisis with like Arrow.
Actually, I don't watch any of that.
Oh, you don't? Because I was going to ask, have you seen Titans?
No.
No. Okay. And my second question was for all of you guys. Do you have a story about with Stan Lee you can share with us?
Well, for me, I really met Stan when I did when the first issue of Fantastic Four that I did was published. And for this, I also thank Joe Sinnott for making me look a lot better than I was. And I got a call from Stan's secretary saying that Stan wanted to see me. So of course, oh gosh, you know, we're going to actually meet Stan Lee. I passed him on occasion in the hallways, or I had seen him on television. And went over, and you know, Stan was like this. I mean, I was still getting used to the idea of working in a job with the head man you can call by his first name. You know, Stan was saying, you know, I saw your work. I thought, you know, I was looking at it here, and always imagined that when I saw it, that's not Buscema, that's not Romita. Who is this guy? So he wanted to meet me, and it was just such an incredible experience. And Stan said, as long as he's alive, that I'll always be able to get work at Marvel, and gave me my first raise right then and there. And again, being so in awe of this, I actually brought books for Stan to sign. No, Stan was so sweet. And even in later years, I'm always surprised that Stan always recognizes me, because Lord knows I changed a lot since I was a 20-year-old. But he was always saying about that, why haven't we ever worked together? And we had a chance to work together in one project, and over at DC, what Stan Lee had reimagined what stuff this particular book in DC, and he and I were supposed to work on what Stan had written, Crisis.
Wow.
But Stan had run so late, I had to get other work because I couldn't wait for him anymore. And I never told Stan, because you missed your deadline, which is why I couldn't work with you.
When you did that invitation, you looked so Jewish. Tim, did you?
My story with Stan is when I first started working up at Marvel, they didn't have an art director, and I sort of became their de facto art director. And one of my jobs was to sit down every morning with Xeroxes of the books that had been drawn, and I would look through them and come up with a cover idea, which I would do a sketch of that was supposed to go off to an artist like John Buscema, Gil Kane, whoever was working up there to do the finished pencils on it. And every morning I would do these sketches up, and then Stan would come in around noon and take me into his office and look through the sketches, and it was always the same story. He'd look through the sketch and go, great, 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 but. And then he would take off his glasses and put them on the seat behind him, and he would crawl up on the table and literally act out how he wanted the Silver Surfer. And we did this 3-4 times a week, so I got used to this routine, and I'm bashing somebody's recording. And so I knew what he was going to do. About every 1 out of 5 times, he was going to forget his glasses.
Oh, God.
Right.
And he would bound off the thing, and before I could say anything, he would sit down on the glasses, and you would hear crunch. And he would pick them up very sadly and look at them. Then he'd reach over the intercom and go, Holly, I did it again. And she would come running in with a new set of glasses, take the remnants out to the optometrist. Start all over. That's my Stan story.
Right. So, I was at Marvel offices for some reason. I guess maybe it was summer, it was hot, and that's what you would do. You'd go for Marvel's air conditioning. And I was 19 years old, and I was inking this thing called The Avengers Annual #7 by Jim Starlin, because that was my first Marvel job. And so I'm in this room working, and all of a sudden Stan Lee bursts in. And he's Stan Lee, holy moly, it's Stan Lee.
Mhm.
And he's got this painting in his hands, which were the covers to the black and white magazines that Marvel used to put out. And he wants to look at it more closely. So, for some reason, he puts it down on the floor, and he looks at it like this, and he puts his elbow right into my ink. Oh. And I think, well, that was a short career. It was fun, but I was hoping for a little more room, And I went, shit. Do I say, Mr. Stanley, you just put your ink in my elbow in my ink, and my life is over, or I don't say a word, and he looks at it later and goes, hey, what happened? Right. And I go, Mr. Lee, you put your ink in my elbow in my ink, and it happens all the time. And that was cool. I love it.
At least my glasses are still in one piece.
This might, this is directed towards Mr. Perez. This might you had when you were doing Infinity Gauntlet and War of the Gods. But I'm curious about what were some of the disagreements and sort of, what were some of the disagreements and conflicts that you had with editorial and when you were working on Wonder Woman in terms of, I remember we were talking earlier. You discussed of how the Feast of Five storyline was a very controversial storyline to do at that time, especially in the later part of that run where.
Okay, trying to repeat it. If I had, particularly during the time of when I was trying to do War of the Gods and Infinity Gauntlet, any editorial conflict I may have had on Wonder Woman. one of the things that I benefited when I was doing Wonder Woman was the editorship of Karen Berger, who was like, she's the Iron Butterfly. She would fight for everything, you know, and I mean, she was a lovely, petite young woman, but you don't cross Karen. And she made sure that, you know, that Wonder Woman was protected. By the time I got to War of the Gods, which, you know, she went through the development and everything else, Karen was pregnant with her first child, and unfortunately, during the course of War of the Gods, she had to leave for maternity leave. So now I was kind of forced to flounder because not very many guys there really were into the Wonder Woman character. So then I had to fight a lot more. So there were a lot more conflicts in there because, you know, they had their ideas of Wonder Woman, I had mine, and, you know, and I had a champion in Karen, and I just lost my champion. So that and that became an issue with War of the Gods, particularly because supposedly it was like a lot of crossover series that, you know, other people were supposed to be cooperating on it and everything else, and finding out that, you know, during the course of War of the Gods, nobody was telling anybody anything. So I was expecting, you know, like to get scripts and stuff from other people, say how they're going to coordinate their plot to work with the storyline of War of the Gods. And in some cases, they wanted to work on it, but they weren't even told about it because the editors there, you know, didn't have Karen poking at them and making them, you know, cooperate. And unfortunately, I was contractually bound to War of the Gods. And that meant I was starting to fall behind on Infinity Gauntlet, and Tom DeFalco, who was editing at the time on Infinity Gauntlet, did give me the option of, when I was falling seriously behind on issue 4, of having Ron Lim finish issue 4 and I can jump onto issue 5. But I knew that all I was going to do was probably cause even more problems deadline-wise. And I always thought that Ron really should have started Infinity Gauntlet. But hey, he set up all the visual groundwork on that book with Jim. I was flattered that they wanted to work with me, but it was. I knew I could not. I was not going to be a benefit to the book anymore. But I also said I'll ink Ron's covers just so they don't think it because of any animosity I have about working there. It's just that I had to finish War of the Gods, which, considering, look at all these great movies based on all this Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War stuff. I've yet to wait for War of the Gods movie. But you know, it was one of those things that
moment now.
Yeah, Karen Berger was the reason you saw a lot of the stuff that got in Wonder Woman, because she treated Wonder Woman like a fantasy character, not a superhero. So she and I were really in sync there. And it wasn't until the Wonder Woman movie and the talk about Wonder Woman movie that came about that suddenly they got a sudden respect to the stories that I had done and wanted to exploit it, which again I'm flattered by. Better late than never. But that's where everything can be measured at the time that Karen was my editor, and then Karen was not my editor. Sure.
Mr. Starlin, I have a question about a death in the family. I wanted to know how the decision came to be that it was going to be left, Jason Todd's fate was going to be left to the public. If you kind of had a preference of where you wanted to go, and and then how you felt when they brought him back.
Okay. I always thought that if you're going to go out and fight crime dressed in black and gray, one of the odder things you could do is bring along a teenager and put him in primary colors. You might as well just have him carry around the sign saying, "Shoot the kid." And so I was always trying to avoid him, and I was always saying, this is a bad idea. That, you know, Robin may have worked really well in the 1930s, but this is, you know, at the, what was it,
1980s.
80s or something like that at that point. It didn't seem like a good idea. And they had an 80s book they were going to do. And they put out a ballot box into the office where you were supposed to put suggestions of who in the DC universe would get AIDS. It seemed like a really good idea to them at the time. It's a pretty gruesome thing now. So, being the sensitive soul that I was, I loaded it up with Robin. They tossed them out, and it turns out Jimmy Olsen won. That dubious honor, but then they found out that the actor who played him in the Christopher Reeve's TV...
Mark Glore.
Yes, he was actually gay in real life, and so they freaked out and they said, we can't do this, and so that entire project was abandoned. And later on, Denny came up with the idea of doing a phone-in thing, And they said, well, we need an idea, and then he said, I have this great idea, let's find out if they really want to keep this Robin around or not. And came up with the plot, and it went from there. And statistically, it was a dead heat tie, which surprised me, because I think of you guys as a bunch of ghouls who will kill off anybody who gets a chance. I was very surprised when almost half the statistically half the people wanted him to live. There's only 72 votes out of 10,000. And he bellied up. We used these 2 pages, and the other 2 pages were used in the Red Hood. And my feelings toward that are next to nothing, because I never actually read it, and it's their character, and it's part of the whole process. You let go of things when you're done working with them.
Mm-hmm.
You have a question?
So the ideas for the Infinity Gauntlet in your brain, right?
My drug-addled brain.
Yes, well, however you want to describe it, right? The whole idea is being as a social concept for like how the universe is developed. That's how you came about it. How did it all come apart with you guys?
That's your question.
How did it all come about? What?
Well, how did it come about in your head and to be a part of the whole entire storyline?
Well, in my case, I was invited. I mean, the thing is, like, I've loved Jim's cosmic stuff when I was reading it myself, and when they offered me a chance to draw another book where I get to draw as many Marvel characters as possible, fantastic. I mean, then I started reading. I mean, I had read some of the earlier Thanos stuff, but I hadn't really read any of the Infinity stuff, the Thanos Quest and all the others. So then I caught up on that, and I said, and I just told him, just throwing a lot of characters. No, I'm fine, just throwing a lot of characters. And to me, that's as much motivation as I need. If I get a chance to do a book, and they say, you get to draw all the characters that you want to draw, then that's fine. I kind of got a little miffed when Thanos snapped his finger and half of them were gone. But
They upset a few people with that one.
And who got
Years
to?
later, strangely.
I just love the fact that it took us only about 10 to 15 pages to do what it took a 2.5-hour movie to do. Only snapped his finger, but it was again just the opportunity to draw a lot of characters. That's what I got into the industry for. And I never imagined it would have the afterlife that it had. That's for sure.
And who got to decide who died and who didn't?
Jim did the
I
script.
think I did.
All of those decisions.
Yeah, the only battle was who was going to be in the book, because none of the editors wanted their characters, especially the X-Men editors. They only let us use 2. I think it was Cyclops and Wolverine.
Yep.
Right.
Of course.
And a few of the other books fought being connected up with tie-ins.
Yeah.
And then the thing sold so well, and all the tie-ins sold so well, that when we got around to doing Infinity War afterwards, everybody wanted their characters in the books, even the characters who hadn't appeared yet. And they had one called Sleepwalker, who I had no idea who he was. They sent me some Xeroxes, and I said, okay, let's have him walk by in the background in this panel, and that's his entire part of the story. Because I knew he could walk on air from the drawings.
Yeah.
So that was good.
the same story I had when Marv and I worked on Crisis on Infinite Earth, that no editors really wanted to participate in the book because they have to basically stop their storyline in order to incorporate the elements of Crisis. So it was like pulling teeth until after the 4th or 5th issue had come out, and it was selling so well, and all the books that were tied in did experience a good sales boost, that suddenly now everyone wanted to cooperate on Crisis on Infinite Earth, because now they had a vested interest in it. But yeah, the same type of thing. These are company characters, but they are individual creators working on these company characters, and sometimes you don't want to say, oh, I'm working this story, this structure in mind, this sequence in mind, and to be told that, no, now you have to stop and incorporate or shoehorn this other plot element that wasn't part of your story, and in some cases you think it's going to be a detriment to your story. So that's always a difficult thing, but of course sometimes money talks.
I apologize to the guys on the panel because they've heard me say this a bunch of times already, but when you ask people who did Gone with the Wind or The Godfather, what was it like? It's like, it was a job. We came in, we did it, we're professionals, we do the best we can. We don't think about the Oscar at the other end. We don't think about the $400 million movie they're gonna make in 40 years. You know, I don't know why I was offered George's job. You know, I never thought about it before. Maybe it's that issue, The Avengers, I did with you, that they liked it, or maybe I walked into the office that day. I don't know. But you know, I have an obligation to George to fulfill his vision. I shouldn't screw it up. And I assume George has an obligation to Jim to give him what he wants to do, and we all do our job. And as Jim alluded to, and then you go on. And then somebody, like the Avengers 2-in-1 annual, which is really the first time Thanos fought, you know, the Avengers. It's like that thing was reprinted literally 15 times in 30 years. It's like, I guess they like it, you know? But I was done with it. You were done with Thanos, right? It's not like you were drawing him all over the place.
Oh, no, yeah, I mean,
You know.
I mean, as flattering as it is, and as many Thanos sketches that I've been asked to do at conventions and private commissions, you know, yes, but I only did 3.5 issues. He did more Thanos than I ever will have done, you know. So it's very flattering, but it was a job, and for me it was like, I get to draw. I had never drawn Thanos before, so I get to draw Thanos, Fisto, and all these other characters. I mean, I didn't draw the book with saying, I get to draw a Thanos story. No, Thanos was the main villain, but I had all these other characters to draw as well, and it was just fun. And the idea that here we are decades later, knowing that these characters and these storylines are still out there, and you know, of course, they keep reprinting. I can't believe how many versions of Infinity Gauntlet I've signed. How many printed editions there? I can only tell the difference sometimes by just opening the cover and seeing, that's not the same flyleaf that I see any other times. The glove is here. The glove is not there. Okay, but again, as Joe said, you know, this is what our job is. Am I grateful for the afterlife? Thanks to royalties and everything else. You damn right. I'm sure.
Right. It's like none of us anticipated Thanos' chia pet.
All those bobbleheads are really freaking me out.
The Funkos, yes, right.
How about a sippy cup?
Okay.
Princess
All right.
I actually wanted to, Joe Rubinstein, first of all, Bob Layton finished Korvac for you.
Okay.
The arms. And I wanted to know, as an inker and a colorist, like, before this, did you get a lot of recognition for your work, and has it really, since the Marvel movies and your involvement with Infinity Wars, have you noticed like a huge increase in your popularity, or, you know, the work you're having to do?
I guess I'm popular.
Yeah.
You did leave dinner early last
I
night.
did. Cheesecake. Phew.
That's good cheesecake.
Then, I'm from New York. Anyway, I read about myself in articles for years that went, the legend Joe Rubinstein, the legendary Joe Rubinstein. It's like, I would never say that about myself, but feel free. You know, I did the Wolverine miniseries, which was a job, and people like it, and it's got legs, and they reprinted Thanos 46 times, and I guess, and I mean, I think I'm well regarded amongst the pencilers in the industry, because my thrust has always been not to dominate, but to let them shine through with a little bit more, God knows, embellishment, you know. So it's nice to be handed things to sign, and certainly, you know, hanging out with George has certainly increased my income. And George has promised to retire every year. So, you know, but you know, I imagine, Jim, do you work alone in your studio?
Yeah.
Okay, George, you work
Yep.
alone. I can't work with a studio because I just want to talk. I just want to tell stories. So I got to spend the majority of my life alone in a room, in my underwear or not. You pick the choice. And at the end of it, you'd like to be a little proud of what you did and not be embarrassed and say, okay, well, I just spent 8, 12 hours of my life not talking to anybody. I hope I have something I enjoy doing and I'm proud to point to after the fact. And sometimes that happens, and very often it doesn't.
Underwear, I'm I'm really surprised you dress that formally.
Yes. I'm naked, but I have a bow tie. And I'm not telling you where it goes. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, now that's burned in my eyes. And no laser surgery's gonna get that out.
We're gonna have to put off dinner for a while.
Okay.
All right, next question.
If it's
Go
about
back
underwear.
Hey, so I'm a Thanos nut, and I'm just kind of curious if I'm wrong in my impression that no one can beat Thanos but Thanos, and kind of, I know Nebula took the gauntlet from him, and I know a lot of people have defeated him over the years, but in my head, I just want to hear it from you. To me,
I think
no one
there-
can beat Thanos.
I think there's a point where you reach a level of power where a battle is decided by who strikes first. You know, it's like nuclear options. I'm always getting Darkseid, Thanos, who would win? I always have to answer, it's whoever strikes first.
Mhm.
You know, and end of answer.
Sure.
How much of your original artwork have all three of you guys gotten back?
Well, I've gotten back everything I've ever drawn, and I've kept it. But like, again, I came into the industry at a time when that became the norm, as opposed to the company being willy-nilly with the artist's work and just handing him out or not returning him ever. No, so I never had that issue. Every bit of artwork, and DC has a policy when you sign their work for hire contract is that in their form that if they lose the artwork, you get paid again for the artwork. So they do compensate. So it gives them the incentive to make sure that they take care of it and return it to you. So I've never had an issue with that.
I came in a little bit earlier than the rest of these guys, and what they would do is they really wanted to keep it, but around the time I came in, everyone found out that up at Marvel, they brought it in and it was sitting on a shelf, and so everyone came in and stole their own artwork back. You only didn't get it back if this one artist who will remain nameless got there first. You know who I'm talking about. Well, maybe there's another one, but there was one who was famous for it. And if you got, and the only pages I never got back were the ones that I traced back to him walking off. But after that, within a year or so, it became the standard practice to hand it back. So most of us got the majority of our.
But Marvel and DC, I think, also had a policy that the inker would only get a third of the book back, unless they did finishes, and then they got half the book back. But it's like if I did Marvel Universe and I did 5 pages with one artist, I'd get 2 of them back, and then I do the 6th one in the other book, and it doesn't count. So inkers were always getting screwed a little bit on that level. But DC Comics used to have a man till the mid-'60s in the production room with a paper cutter and a barrel, and he'd spend all day just chopping up the artwork so we could get it the hell out of the way and throw it away. And occasionally somebody would walk up and go, I really like that page, can I have it? Okay. But generally they just destroyed the stuff, and then eventually they started to store it, and then eventually they said, we own it, but we're gonna be nice and give it back to you, but we own it.
Who was most responsible for returning it or getting the policy that you guys would get it returned?
I myself don't know because it was already policy by that point for me, so I don't know.
Yeah, up at Marvel, it was Roy, pushed it more than anybody else, I think. Roy Thomas.
But at one point, they would give the original couple of pages to the writer, because as far as they were concerned, he was a contributor to the art, but one day, Craig Russell did a whole Doctor Strange, and he said, can I borrow the artwork for a minute? And he took it, and all the lettering had been pasted on. So he took all the lettering off, left it in the envelope, and said, here, this is for the writer.
Let's go with the back of the wall first.
Hi, Mr. Perez. I was wondering what motivated you to create your own comic book? And the second question for you guys, are there any artists that you see now who you think are going to be the next breakthrough artists?
Well, I mean, in doing my own comics, everyone wants to have a little creative control over their work. Unfortunately, as much as I put into the work, it never became profitable for me because I was putting so much work in. There was no way I can pay myself enough with that kind of work, particularly if you had to also handle touring to promote the book. So it was never something that I was successful at, which is probably, like the last book I did was for Boom, because even though they allowed me total creative freedom, I got to do whatever I want, but they handled all the administrative work, which I was not really equipped to do. And I don't remember what was the last part of your question.
Is there any artists or talents that you're seeing?
Well, since I don't, unfortunately, since I really don't read comics anymore, when I'm away from my drawing board, I'm married. And I find, that I need to, when I'm not actually producing comics, that I can, have a life outside of comics. So I really don't know. I've seen a lot of, really great artists out there, but I couldn't identify them because I don't read them, so I don't read the credits, so I don't know who they are. But that's basically it. I don't follow. And that's not to denigrate anybody or even the industry. It's just the fact that I've been working on this so long that I really like to have a life outside of comics when I'm not actually involved.
Has anyone came back and credited their career to you?
Oh, plenty of times. I've been very flattered by that. Where they said I've either inspired them. I figure anyone who actually wants to emulate me, because the amount of details, okay, then you are insane. I'm not an easy person to. If you want to be like me, more power to you. But for me, I think the late Dick Giordano commented on it. That despite all the stuff that I did with all the detail and everything else, he said yes. But the one thing that kept you going was, even if you strip all that away, I knew how to tell a story visually. And that became the most important thing. And I value that. And all the other stuff is just extra garnish that I put onto it.
I was supposed to ask.
No, don't ask that.
No?
No, I didn't mean that.
All right, we'll shift over here
You
quickly.
guys can make up your own joke.
Like- This is a question for all three of you as both writers and artists. Like, I know this is just a job for you, a job many times, but like, were there ever times where you were working on something that really affected you emotionally, or even you felt uncomfortable sort of writing or drawing about?
I've had some jobs I really hated, but mostly those are from outside influences, editorial influences. Anything that I've actually written or plotted, I've been comfortable with, just because I like to experiment, and if it's a little strange sometimes, I think that's the positive thing.
Yeah. For me, I've worked with a lot of collaborators, and I've had great relationship with so many writers, and of course the stuff that I've written on my own. I think the only time that I had any bitterness or uncomfortable feeling working was more recently, because of the fact that the industry has changed so much, and now it's corporate comics, in which sometimes we're being asked not to create comics but to manufacture comics, and that bothered me during my run on Superman, the last New 52 Superman, where it was a book being done by committee, and I don't think I really got a chance to really create, as opposed to follow the dictates of what we have in mind, put your name on it, and yet they couldn't make up their minds what they wanted from day to day. So that was starting to sour me, and that was the only time that. At one point, I had told them, because usually I was a writer on it as well. I would send in the script, and then they would do their editing and whatever, change it and send it back to me, until finally I just said, here's the script, however it's printed, whatever the final product is, it's your job. If the fans love it, fantastic, my name's attached to it. If they don't like it, I can't help that, even though my name's still attached to it. And that was, for me, the nadir of my career, because for the first time working in the industry, I didn't care. They made me not care. And I don't blame the people at DC for it. I mean, they're trying to, they're following the dictates of Warner that's now have so much more of a hands-on policy with that. But it wasn't.
It's for me, I'm not here.
Don't talk about it.
Okay.
I can't talk to her. Oh, excuse me a second.
Push to turn it off. Yeah.
Sweetie, I'm in the middle of a panel. Okay, honey.
You got that, right?
Okay, sorry. I know she said she's coming over. She doesn't know where I am. No, but that was it. I mean, that was more a personal thing. And when one of the things I refused to do when it was all happening, I never talked about it in the press, and only after I had left the book was it made public, because I was at a Superman convention. Somebody asked me directly, and I wasn't going to deny or lie to them. But it was the fact that, okay, maybe retirement is now the best thing for me, because this is what they want to do. They can be successful at it. If I'm the one who's uncomfortable, then I should be the one to leave. Not because they're doing it wrong. It's just that I can't play in that field anymore.
By the way, to answer your previous question, I don't read that many comic books anymore, but Sean Murphy's really great. And there's a guy named Albuquerque and Fiona Staples. You know, I can go on people like Ivan Rios, and he's not recent. He's by the way, you. I think the reason all these people like Ivan Rios is putting in all these details is they're trying to outdo you. Thank you fucking very much.
Then my work here is done.
Right. Okay, but to answer the question, I've never been upset, like emotionally upset doing a comic book exactly. But the first time the 2-page spread with Peter Parker and Clark Kent on the same page showed up at the studio I was working at, that was thrilling. Oh my God, what are we, and all that stuff. But Mr. Starlin over there, doing a good thing for humanity, put together the Heroes for Hunger book. What was it called?
The Heroes, yeah.
The Marvel one, but the Marvel one.
I forgot the name.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So he and the late great Bernie Wrightson put together this book for African famine relief. So I'm inking Alan Weiss's 2 pages. We all had 2-page things. And I was watching that worldwide telethon, the one that's in the Freddie Mercury movie that he performs at. And so I'm inking my pages and watching this thing, and I kind of felt like I was sort of attached to the world at that time, because everybody was watching it, and we were all working on the same project at the same time. So that gave me a little bit of pride that I was helping them.
All I remember about it, it was like 20 writers, 20 artists.
Yeah.
It was like herding friggin' cats.
Did you get any sympathy for your editors after that?
Not a bad.
Yeah, I didn't work at that one, because I worked on the DC one.
Right.
We'll go right to the back.
Speaking to Mr. Perez's point.
We can't hear you.
Sorry, speaking to your point about having some issues with editorial, we're seeing the industry change a little bit with things like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where creators are a bit more challenged and they're speaking directly to their audience, and the audience is supporting them. Is that something, I believe, Mr. Sherman, you've got, you do your
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that something that you've had experience with thus far, or would consider using?
All my stuff through Amadeus is a Kickstarter setup. I think it's a good way to cut out the middleman. I think it's going to be a pathway for a lot of future artists, and I'm having a great time with it, and I have more stuff in the tubes in the plan to go along that route.
Yeah. I'm retired.
Right over.
Quick question. I can't speak for everyone else here, but I've been collecting comics since I was little. George Perez artwork. I have a comic book collection. Do you guys collect comics, or what do you collect? Each of you.
I've never been a collector of anything, actually. When I read comics, I read them until they were threadbare. And the idea of saving them was never something that came to me. So even to this day, there's nothing I actually collect. People give me things.
Your own work you don't collect either?
Oh no! If I kept my own work, I'd be wallpaper in my house 5 or 6 times over. No, I have an art agent. He sells my artwork, and I'd rather it go out to people who want to play. I have a couple of pieces of my own work that I have kept. The Wonder Woman 10 cover, the triptych cover. I've kept that one. A cover to a comics interview because I drew my wife on it as well, so that has a sentimental attachment. But that's, very little do I actually keep because I have no room for it.
Yeah, pretty much the same way. I've got a box of stuff that I wrote or drew in the closet in the studio, and not much else. Though I am beginning to get a collection of Thanos paraphernalia
Yeah.
that's outside my studio. But that's about it.
I collect books that are collections of like the art of Alex Raymond or Milton Caniff or something like that. I'm also a painter, so every new book that comes out on Harry Anderson or Norman Rockwell or something like that, you know, I have way too many books, and you can't stop now. But I don't have action figures, and I don't have, you know, anything.
I'm clearly the only child here.
Well, no, for me, it's just a matter of room.
Yeah.
I mean, they gave me some, so my neighbors, you know, young children, oh, they're benefiting. Anytime I get a package
Oh, yeah.
from DC or DC merchandise, I said, would you like this? Heck yeah, the kids come over and I mean, I used to donate all my comics to the military. You know, when they were still sending out comps, until I finally had to tell them, you know, please stop sending me comps. But again, it's more a question of room. There's some stuff that, gosh, I wish I had room for this, but I just don't. They sent me a cyborg statue that's about this tall. I have no place to put it.
Can't you start the George Perez Museum down the block?
Yeah.
Yeah, now there's a thought, yeah. I could be a nonprofit. Lord knows I've been that before.
Not on purpose.
Speaking of your wife being on the cover of the comics interview,
Do you want to have a column first before this question?
it's got less to do with your wife and more to do with just
Okay.
a general question. How often have you guys slipped in friends, family, that type of thing into your art?
Oh, I've done several books where that was the main gimmick, where I put in all the characters are real people. Sometimes I use their likeness, but I also use their names with their permission, because I figure when this book comes out, that means every family member is going to want to buy multiple copies. and in some cases, it also taught me how to draw individual faces, because obviously, in addition to drawing a crowd where you have to draw all the characters so they look like individuals, they also have to look like identifiable individuals. So that was also a great chance. It was a way of working, and I also developed a lot of friendships, including that lovely lady over there who was one of my characters way back in 1990s, 1997. She hasn't aged a bit, by the way.
She was a baby in that issue, right? She was a baby.
No, she was
She was a babe. I know.
She was a babe.
She was the hatchling. Yes. Oh, no. As you said, she's a babe, and she still is. But you know, it's a lot of fun, and again, it's a great learning bit to be able to draw, even when you're creating faces, to have, okay, you have these type of noses, you have these type of ears, you have type of shapes of faces. So it's a good training as an artist.
I signed a copy of this today. I grew up in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, and I did an issue of Justice League International set in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, coincidentally. And there is a party at a Russian nightclub, so I drew my father in. I think that one of the few pages I ever kept.
It's great.
So.
I did a series called The Metamorphosis Odyssey, which is all painted, and because it was going to be painted, I wanted to use photo reference, which I'd never used before. And so I was grabbing different people for being characters. Sometimes it was me for Dreadstar, Zah. Frank Miller was Juliet's father. Lynn Varley, who was Juliet, who later became Mrs. Miller, was the Juliet. And I had one character for a book called The Price, who was named Syzygy. And originally Syzygy was supposed to be a black man in the story, except the guy who was coming over never showed up for the photo session. And so I had a deadline, and he walked into the studio.
Like a black man, but so different.
I said, okay, take your pants off, put this shirt on.
Again?
You're gonna And he became Syzygy until he got blown up, and then I used somebody else.
Is that what you're calling it now? Yeah, I'm basically, I get into my tidy whities, and he gives me a towel to drape in front like a loincloth, and I'm naked, otherwise I'm going.
So yeah, I put a few people.
Yeah.
Mr. Starlin, is it easier to write for a character that you create yourself, or a character that's already established in either the Marvel or DC universe?
Well, if it's a character I've created myself, there's usually probably not an editor between me and what we're doing. And sometimes the editor can be a real bonus, like Archie Goodwin, Roy Thomas. Archie was the best editor I worked with, and just about anyone who's ever worked with him will tell you that. On other occasions, though, I worked with one editor who did not know the difference between a panel and a caption. I was just drawing a story for another person to write, and he kept sending me emails saying, too many captions, too many captions. And I'm going, I'm not writing this. And it took me a while to figure it out. So I'd say the majority of the time, your creator own is a lot easier because you can feel free to go wherever you want with that. Where if it's, say, like Batman, if you break Batman, you got to put him back together before you put him back in the toy box. So it works out in different ways.
I have a question for Mr. Perez that's somewhat related to the last one. So when you're working on something that's a little bit more original, or like an original character, or a story that you're sort of reimagining the character, do you find that you have to really pin down the character development before you can start exploring plot? Or do you find that you sort of use the plot as an avenue to further crystallize the traits of the character and sort of what their personality is?
Well, again, if I'm doing it on my own, I try to have the backstory already well set in my mind so that the characters don't end up being puppets in their own storyline, where they're just that the puppet is the unit that manipulates them.
So the character development is very plot driven.
Yes, exactly, because then you realize that if you develop your character well, there are certain things that the plot can't do without going against the laws you just created for that character. No, the character would not behave that way. The old cliche about characters writing themselves after a while. So it really, if you want characters who are interesting, you have to work from the inside out, and then put them in situations.
I have a question for Mr. Perez. You said when you first started, you said it once before, you didn't draw well, and you were happy that Sinnott and the like were saving your ass. But you could storytell very well. So, one, what gave you the nerve to put in samples that weren't drawn well? And two, how did you learn to be a better artist?
Well, in the first part is the fact that since I didn't know very much about art, I didn't know I didn't draw well. You have the youthful cockiness where you think that you can draw anything. That, oh yeah, this looks good to me. And of course, since I had no art training, the only criticism I had, like my parents were going to hang any crap I put on the refrigerator. And then when I realized, there were some artists I absolutely adored. I Buscema, Kane, Swan, Adams, definitely. And I realized if I wanted to reach their level and I expect to get paid, I had to start learning. And for that, I had to start slowing down. And actually, give myself the education that I did not have formally, and had the great advantage of being paid along the way. That I'm being paid to do it. And that the storytelling allowed me to improve as an artist, because they would constantly give me work to do, but I realized, okay, now I'm getting to do this, but if I want a long life, let me start learning. So I got books on anatomy, I got books on the Vern Hogarth books, I got all of them. Rich Buckler was one who recommended those to me.
But after the fact, not before. Like when you were
Exactly.
learning to do it, you didn't buy those books.
No,
amazing.
we couldn't afford it.
Oh.
Well,
Yeah.
also you probably didn't know about him either.
Exactly. So all these things, like Rich was the one who first told me about it, because he had some of those books, and other ones I found out about. And I had some of the great people telling me what I was doing wrong. I mean, when John Romita comes in and starts, drawing over my work, saying how things could look better, and realizing I'm getting an education of a lifetime here. And because I was a cocky kid going in, anytime I got a criticism, they said, "Oh," one person said, "You don't draw enough background and you don't know perspective." So I would go in and say, "What does this guy do? He obviously doesn't know anything." So I would go in there, and I did a page where I had a character over a cityscape, shot down in perspective, and said, "See," in my mind saying, "See, I proved you wrong." No, what I've done is I proved them right, because I addressed the problem that they were telling me about. And that's why I tell a lot of kids when they're aspiring, that you got to really keep your ego in check. and understand when a person's just being nasty and being constructive. And I was being given the opportunity of a lifetime to have all these master artists in their craft telling me how to get better. And, you know, getting past that cockiness of, you know, of hating criticism, that no, you're insulting my baby. And that, you know, you learn, and in fact, again, since I really, really wanted to be a comic book artist, I was gonna do whatever I had to do.
Are you embarrassed by your old work?
Not at all. I would be embarrassed if I still do that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, you know, we all came in during the 70s and that was like, it was a factory. The most important thing was to get it in the time. So all of us came in and started working before we were really good enough to be doing it, because they were expanding from like 8 books to 22 books a month. And so I tell people that I came across when they were hiring anybody who could come across the state line and hold a pencil, and I just barely qualified.
Right, because they had the black and white line too, so they expanded all these, so many books, and there was a talent shortage, so they were gonna hire everybody.
Yeah,
I remember when somebody saw my first work, which was a rush job and everything else, and it says, and they knew I worked with Rich Buckler. What? Anybody who, a drinking buddy of Rich Buckler's gonna get a job, no matter how bad they are, you know, they needed to fill space.
And you know, Marvel also had like a minor league team because they were doing British reprints, and they got anybody in the world to draw a new cover and a new splash for it.
I started doing that.
Yeah,
well, I did the first ones.
I believe it.
I was a B-team way back when.
And that's where John Romita Jr. was doing lots of his stuff, and all these people were training. But you know, the advantage inkers have over the pencilers is we can hide for the first 2 years. If somebody's tight enough, you just trace the lines very carefully and don't make any waves, and then they think you're a professional inker, and then, you know, eventually you get good. But a professional penciler, if they're no good, you can see it immediately, and so many inkers just like lay in the background.
I remember a comment that was made of the late Vince Coletta, who obviously had a reputation that, you know, like
leave the backgrounds out.
Leave the background out, because again, he was getting one of the lowest page rates, and he was producing, you know, as much work as he can do.
Or if there's a figure in the background, says, see this? It's a background.
That's right, yeah, leave it out. But one of the things they said about Vince, but I think with so many of us young artists who are subjected to Vince's inking, is the fact that Vince basically homogenized everyone. I mean, everyone was the same. So the fact that he'll either bring you up to his level or bring you down to his level, depending on your competence as a penciler. So, and again, he became valuable because he was fast. And then the man could ink a book in a day. And that's not an exaggeration either. You know, so again,
he could ink half a book in a day.
That's right. It becomes half a book by the time he's done with it. Yes.
But you know, here's the difference. Vinny took great pride in the fact that, hey Vinny, can you ink these 100 pages by Thursday? Yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah, give me the pen. You know, and he got it in, and he was happy, and he did the work, and you saved money, right? But I was at Tony DeZuniga's studio, and they were inking an issue of Tarzan, and they asked me to help out. And Tony and Alcala and I inked a 25-page issue of Tarzan that day, and it looked great. There's the difference.
Yes.
Okay, because Tony and Alcala were gods.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, so one more question.
Make it good.
Yeah, it's got to be a good one.
None of these sucky ones. Come on.
I just
the young guy up front here.
Go ahead.
What's my favorite color? Sure.
How do you feel that now that Thanos is on the big screen?
That's you.
Blessed, blessed, damned. You know, it's a mixture. It depends on my time of day. You know, we were quite comfortable being little cult characters, him and I, and so it's taken a little adjusting to becoming pop icon and his daddy. So it's surreal. It's opened up tremendous opportunities to me. At the same time, it's caused a few little difficulties, which I won't go into, but you know, but more often than not, it's been positive.
Did you want to say anything, George?
Oh, no. Thanos is it, baby.
Well, I'll tell you. They did a Wolverine movie from the Miller miniseries I inked, and it was barely the same plot. It was the name of the characters, but it wasn't my story at all, which was very disappointing to me. When I saw the first movie of Endgame, and Thanos was beating up the Avengers, I was delighted. It was the closest I'd ever seen to the comic book I did come to life, and I was just sort of mesmerized watching
Yeah,
it.
but they brought back the memory of the Thanos helicopter. I'm never gonna forgive him for that.
And I think in the movie, didn't the Walker walk by in one scene?
Sleepwalker.
Sleepwalker, yeah.
Sleepwalker.
Quick and easy to miss.
All right.
That's it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
So did you guys actually plan the shirts?
Yeah, we did.
No,
That's the
actually,
bold
I
thing.
usually wear black, I really wear red, and I was down in public area.
Thomas.
I didn't know.
Got at least we're back.